Hello, this is Michael J. Emery. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the recommended books. Since this is the first video that I'm going to be putting together for a recommended reading list, I'll tell you a little bit about my story. It's kind of funny. When I was in the first grade, I couldn't write, I couldn't read, and I know that I was in school to learn these things, but I was that problem student in many ways. And I remember being in like one of the youngest reading classes, and every day I was just terrified of, one, going to school, but also not being able to read the simple Dick and Jane stories and stuff that we had to read at that time. And it wasn't until probably the second grade, I think, and out of sheer boredom and being at a babysitter's house where I wasn't allowed to watch TV and there were limited things for my brother and I to do, I remember wandering over to a bookshelf and grabbing a book that had some interesting pictures on it and beginning to thumb through the book. And it took probably a good month or so, but I began to read this book, and every single word I would be sounding it out, and eventually the words became sentences and the sentences became paragraphs, and I was flying through these books. And within probably a year's time, I really taught myself how to read, and I finished reading the entire Chronicles of Narnia. You're probably familiar with the books, or at least the movies that have come out recently, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and Prince Caspian and stuff like that. And so that was kind of how I got an introduction into reading, and since then I've just become an avid reader. It's really something that as a younger kid I kind of escape off into a fantasy land through my reading, but as an adult it's really served me. I've been able to expand my my knowledge greatly, and not to say that I'm a super bright or super intelligent person, but just there are things out there that I've been able to experience through reading that I would not have come across, had I just been living my life. One of these, I can remember going through a transitionary phase of my life, and one of those points that's really important for me was going through a phase where I was starting to step away from organized religion. And just a brief background on me: I was raised as a Protestant, a Christian, and I had actually attended a Bible college for a short time, and I can share more about those stories in another video or something. But I remember being at a girlfriend's house, and her parents had this book that totally fascinated me, and I've got a copy of it here. If you can read this, it's actually in Spanish. It says El Alchemista, and it's The Alchemist. It's a book that was written by Paolo Coelho, who is a Brazilian author. This was probably one of the books that had a life-lasting change, and it was very impactful for me. And I can remember when I picked up the book, the title kind of fascinated me because, at the time I'd heard of alchemy, that was supposed to be, changing various metals into gold, or at least the attempt to do so. And as I picked up this book and started to thumb through a couple of the pages, the story kind of grabbed a hold of me. And I remember reading this, and in my conscious mind, I would come across these things that were stories that, they included a lot of the legends and the myths from the Abrahamic religions. And for those if you don't know what an Abrahamic religion is, that'd be Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, or the various sects within those religions. And I was familiar with the stories because of my past growing up and in the church and going to a Bible college, and the stories were interesting, but I didn't understand the universality of the stories and the way that they blended together to create a story that's kind of, in a way, a monomyth or an archetypal story. And Paulo Coelho is an amazing author. I've had an opportunity to read several of his other books, and they're super insightful. Definitely check him out. But what I found with this book is I was reading through it, and I would get to the point where I would be reading about a story, and a character's name would pop up, and I'd be like, okay, I know what that name is, and I know, kind of a historical account of it. Yet the way that the name was used, or the context of the story, it shifted everything for me. And I was reading the story and going, in my mind, I'm going, this isn't in alignment with what I've been taught to be true. This pretty much goes in the face of the religion that I had believed up to that point in my life. And on a deeper level, though, there was something that kept urging me to read the book, because it was saying this is true. This is not necessarily the truth with a capital T or some philosophical, perspective on it, but what you've been taught, what you understand, doesn't encompass the whole truth, or it doesn't encompass the various facets of truth. And I found The Alchemist to be an amazing starting point. And it was really when I kind of branched off into books on psychology or self-help or personal development. And this book has seen probably at least 6 to 8 different countries. It's traveled around with me in my backpack, and it's one of those favorite books that it's even got people's phone numbers in it, just because it was all I had to write in at the time. But it's an amazing journey, and it's an introduction to spirituality. It's an introduction to following your dreams. And if you have an opportunity to pick it up, definitely get it. Go to Amazon.com or go to your local bookstore. Get a copy of this book, and I'm sure that you'll just kind of devour it. There are plenty of other great books that I will follow up on this video with, and just encourage you to go out there and add to your library. I've got a number of titles that I want to share with you, and this is probably one of the longest videos. But again, The Alchemist, Paolo Coelho. Go to Amazon, get it, read it, and just contrast your life and your life journey by what the author is saying, or what the main character is experiencing in the book. And I think that you'll find some delightful and insightful correlations. Be amazing. This is Mike Emery. Catch you later.